Okay, so this is part two. In part one, we took a trip back in time, the nostalgic look at the cable of yesteryear when it was just getting started, and touched on a few things that actually help clarify my point when it comes to streaming. It's not absolutely necessary, but it'll help a lot if you hear the first part. So if you haven't heard the first part and somehow or another you've come upon part two, go back and find part one. And ignore the road noises, please. So, part two, Netflix and beyond. Netflix, when it first arrived, a lot of people who weren't of a certain age probably didn't see the similarities, but Netflix, when it first arrived, was a lot like early cable. And there was kind of a reason Netflix was like that, but even more so. And that was Netflix shouldn't exist. Netflix really should not exist. When you look at all the things that make sense when you're setting up a business, Netflix is one of those things that's like, this doesn't make any sense. And all the people who knew better knew that it didn't make any sense. All the people that knew better said that it didn't make any sense. And because they knew better, Netflix became a juggernaut. When Netflix first started out, actually, let's go back a little bit farther. Before Netflix officially started out, Netflix was this idea. And I want you to think back 2004, 2003. Internet. A lot of people were still on dial-up. And not even just as a matter of budget. A lot of people had no choice. I had the budget to have more than dial-up. I couldn't. I didn't live like out in the middle of the sticks, hours away from civilization. I lived, when I leave the house, I get in my car and I leave to go to work. I can be downtown in 6 minutes. I could get downtown and I would be in the heart of an area that between the state, local, and federal buildings, and then all the businesses, I was in the heart of the area in this immediate area that was the hub for the best, the newest, the fastest of the internet. Because you had all of the important stuff and you had like the communication stuff. So you would think, you would have at least a good setup everywhere around that. I can get, like I said, home to downtown, 6 minutes on a good day, 10 on a bad day. I can be right in the middle of it. And at the time, I was unable to get broadband. And I tried. And I can't remember what the term was that they used, but they dumbed it down and said, on ever so many of these poles you see on the side of the road or going through neighborhoods or being set up, we have these boxes. And you need to be, near one of these boxes for, all of that to reach. You need to be X amount of poles away from a box or have another box there or whatever. And I was X number of poles too far away from a box. And I couldn't get broadband. And this is 2020. This is the year 2020. And there are still parts of the United States where people cannot get broadband internet. And I'm not talking about, when I say parts of the United States, I'm not talking about the far-flung areas way out there in the Alaskan wilderness. I'm not talking about Puerto Rico, even before all the damage. I'm talking about like areas around major metropolitan areas. My mother-in-law lives within spitting distance of several major hubs of tourism and, for lack of a better word at the moment, civilization. But because of where she lives, she can drive within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes in almost any direction. And she can be in an area that has the best of the current high-speed internet available to it in the houses. And the only type of internet she can get is dial-up or through a satellite provider. And for those of you who have never dealt with satellite, it is extremely expensive, and it is extremely spotty. I could not, if I was living where my mother-in-law lives, I would never be a part of a podcast. I would never be able to see streaming because it would be cost prohibitive, or at best, we'd be recording one of the shows and I would probably drop out 2 or 3 times per show. It's just, that's the realities of 2020. Well, 2004, 2005, 2006, that was even more so the realities of the United States. So these guys come up with this idea: we're going to take digital content and we're going to put it all together on this one place, and we're going to sell access to it. And people, they can't download it. They can't keep it. They got to stream it. Buffering. That was a big thing. And also, for those of you who aren't quite old enough to remember, actually go look when YouTube was officially created. But more to the point, look when YouTube actually really became a thing after it was officially created. The idea of everybody having access to streaming video was not really a thing when these guys were putting Netflix together. So they went and took this idea and they brought it to the various owners of all of this intellectual content. And the studios that make the movies and the TV shows. And they said, we got this great idea and we think it's a winner, and we're going to do this, and we want to purchase the distribution rights for the content that you own for the digital streaming platform. And I don't know what they actually called it at that point. But a lot of the studios looked at these guys and they were like, and how many times were you dropped on your head this morning? Because it was a ridiculous idea. We were kind of sort of beginning to see the creation of digital content. Not really being pushed mainstream at that time, but we were beginning to see it. But most of the studios, the old school studios, they had no idea what to do with it. It was like some bizarre, like, extra that they might be able to sell you. Oh, well, yeah, we'll give you this. You can buy the disc, and here's you get this this thing where you can download a digital copy that you can put on your computer and watch whenever you want to, or maybe you can put it on your iPod or whatever device you have and watch it whenever you want to. But it was considered like this cheap extra. It wasn't even considered a major selling point because there was so much about it that was also counterintuitive to the belief of what people wanted out of home entertainment. Like right now, like one of my podcast partners, Richard Ewell, Assignment Horror, we joke with him on the show because he watches most of the movies that we're going to cover. He sits down and he watches them, quietly by himself on his phone. He doesn't watch them on TV. And Richard, particularly for his age group even, is an outlier, and particularly for older age groups. Because if you go back and you look at home entertainment, home entertainment, the ideas of people want their home entertainment systems bigger, louder, big screens, giant screens, big sound systems. The idea of, we're going to still have a rinky-dinky little TV screen with tiny little speakers was considered the thing that people wanted to get away from. So you're suddenly in the midst of like the new HD televisions are starting to roll out, and they're talking about not only do these things look better, and not only with the sound bars and the systems that you can get, do they sound better, but on average you can get a lighter, thinner screen, doesn't take up as much room on the display stand, and it's a bigger picture. That was one of the selling points. And suddenly you have these guys saying, well, you can watch this stuff, you can watch all the TV and movies on your computer, on your little device that you can have right here in the corner with its dinky little speakers and its maybe sort of okay video quality. And you can't download it. You gotta pay every month and stream it. Buffering. So the powers that be at each one of the studios, they just kind of patted them on their heads, looked at the ability of the internet in most areas, looked at what they thought were the prevailing trends with how people want to view their entertainment, and looked at this stuff that they considered at the time just this kind of, it's this thing that we have and we don't really know what to do with, and it doesn't really have any value, digital content. And they said, you know what, sure, you guys want to go bankrupt, you guys want to throw your money in the trash, pardon me, you can go ahead and throw some of that money into our bank account. We have no problem with you throwing it away in our bank account instead of throwing it away in the trash. So here, where's the contract? We'll sign this nice long-term deal at this ridiculous price that's we're paying you, you're paying us way more than this stuff is worth, but here you go, we'll sign that. There you go, kids. Now get on out the door, and maybe come back one day, we'll let you be a janitor, you dumb schmucks. And they went around and they got the rights for their streaming platform from all of these people who just did not understand the value of what they had. And part of the reason they didn't understand the value of it was because nobody understood the value of it, and nobody had proven that there was value to it. It was Netflix that proved that the streaming content, that this digital content and a streaming platform combined together could have incredible value for a business. So Netflix launches, and Netflix was very much like cable in the early days in a great many ways. Number one, it couldn't launch wide everywhere. It wasn't like it went all 50 states, all the counties and everything in every state. You could suddenly sign up for your $6-7 a month and we have Netflix, because it was limited by internet. If you didn't have broadband, if you didn't have high-speed internet, there was no point. You couldn't watch it. You cannot watch Netflix or any other streaming service on dial-up. And unless you've got a crap ton of money, you don't want to watch a streaming service on a lot of the satellite internet providers. So you were very much limited to where you could go. So a lot of places, including where I lived, you would hear about this thing and you'd kind of wonder what this was, and you'd kind of shake your head going, that sounds a little, I don't know. But then you'd hear people talking about how amazing, awesome, wonderful this was, and you weren't sure yourself. You had to see it. Well, eventually you did see it. And maybe you could get it, maybe you couldn't. But if you saw it, you were like, holy crap. Because Netflix, when it first launched, and especially once it really got itself going, and especially 2007. 2007 in my area, they had put up 1 or 2 new housing developments near me, so we got some, new poles with boxes, and suddenly it was like we had access to Comcast high speed, we had access to Verizon, we had tried some things like, I think it was just called Clearwire or Clear whatever it was, that was kind of like the equivalent of cell service internet, and that didn't work too well. But we had tried these different things, and now we had the real deal. And so we went ahead and we dove straight in and we did our Netflix. And it was unreal. I mean, you could bring up Netflix and start scrolling through everything they had to offer. And there were, TV shows, the completion, not a season, not 2 seasons, like 5, 10, 15 seasons, TV shows from 60 years ago to 2 years ago to last year. There were movies that were like silent era movies. There were movies from other countries. There were movies from 6-8 months ago in the box office. And there were things on there, there were all the old favorites, and then there were these like wild looking things that you might have only ever heard of before but never had a chance to see, or things that looked really cool and you were like, I have no idea what this is. I've never seen it before, never heard of it before, but hell, why not? It's $6 a month, $7 a month. I'm going to give this a try. So you'd sit there and look at this stuff, and even though, and honestly, binging was a thing before streaming entertainment. Everybody talks about binging now, and binge-worthy shows and binge-worthy movies, franchises, and things like that. And people talk about binging now as though binging was this thing that was created when streaming came along. No, once, not so much VHS, because VHS used to be very stupid about, they'd start putting TV shows out on VHS, and they had a format which I used to want to smack the crap out of them. I think the British shows didn't quite follow the format. Like if you had a 30-minute show, and with a lot of the British shows, a 30-minute show was a 30-minute show. Not, well, you take the commercials out, it's actually only 22. They might put 4, maybe 5 episodes on a tape. But with VHS, they would put shows start putting a season of a show out on individual cassette tapes. And it was like, oh, well, this show has hour-long episodes, and minus the commercials, they're about 42 to 45 minutes long, and they're putting 2 episodes on a tape. Oh, when they come out with this show that I really like, this great comedy, that's a 30-minute show. That's cool. I ought to have 4, maybe 5 shows on a tape. And it's like, no, they kind of had their format. You get 2 shows. Or for those of you who grew up as like G.I. Joe fans, like Family Home Entertainment would sell you a videotape for like $14.95 that was one 22-minute episode. So, but VHS gets replaced by DVD, and then suddenly, you could get an entire season in one box of like 5 or 6 discs with multiple shows on each disc. And a lot of times when a new season of a show hit the shelves and people went out and bought them, that's kind of what they did. Was the new show dropped, just dropped on the sale shelves. The new show dropped, they went out, they paid their money, they took it home, they were off that weekend, and they binged the entire season. But streaming took that to a whole new level, because you had the ability to binge so many shows, so many movies, and so many seasons in one go. And there was no get up, change the disc, put season 1 back on the shelf, see if you could find season 2, take the disc out, it was just click, 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 click. And people were just, particularly entertainment fanatics, people that love movies and love the shows, were just, this was the golden age of entertainment. It was the greatest thing ever. And Netflix was a greatest hits collection of the best that was out there. And then you also had kind of the oddball stuff, and then you had the stuff you'd never heard of, and it was all right there at your fingertips. And like $6-7 a month wasn't that expensive. And it even had the stuff on there that while you had the cord you were talking about to your friends, it was like, oh, this Spartacus thing, or this this Sex in the City, or this, that, and the other, because there were shows on Netflix that were the cable channel exclusive shows. The stuff you had to have HBO or Showtime to see. Netflix had the digital rights to a lot of those early on. Netflix had the digital rights to Disney stuff. And I mean, it was there was no way you could not sit down on January the 1st and start streaming on Netflix. And by December 31st, you probably could not have watched every single thing that was on that platform, between how much was there and how much was getting added during the year as new things dropped. You probably not at the very least have a work life. Forget the rest of your life. If all you did was work, sleep, and watch Netflix, you probably could not have watched everything on there. And people were just blown away. And the more people talked about it, the more people got curious, the bigger it got, and the more money it started getting. And the more money it started getting, the more it started kind of putting nails in its own coffin. Or at least the coffin of streaming being the golden age. Because what happened was, slowly these studios started paying attention. And they realized they'd signed these long-term deals with these crazy, wild-eyed kids to give them this worthless crap that they had no real idea of how to use. And these wild-eyed kids suddenly proved that you can make a buttload of money with this stuff. And it had value. If you paired this digital content with a platform, a reliable platform that people could subscribe to and have access to whenever they wanted it, that you could make a small fortune. And first, the studios decided that they needed a bigger piece of the pie. So kind of like what happened with cable, where you had this one channel that got kind of popular, and the company that owned it decided they were going to make 2 or 3 or 4 other channels, and then eventually 5 and 6 and 7 other channels. And you started running into things. So it's like, well, if you want our 2 really good channels, you have to carry, our 8 crappy channels. You didn't get that, but you sort of got the streaming equivalent of it, which was these major entertainment creators who did not yet have their own streaming capabilities started telling Netflix when contracts came up, no. If you want this, you got to pay much, much more money for it. And if you want that, you got to pay much, much more money for it. And what we ended up with was that the streaming service, Netflix, was now, they had a lot more money. They were making more money. But studio after studio, content owners were saying, well, you have to pay this huge amount of money if you want all of this. And in some cases, Netflix was like, well, we'll pay you this much money. And negotiations were had, and eventually some things dropped off the service. And, a little time went by, and Netflix is like, hey, we've got increased costs. We've got this. We also are doing some things that we're looking at for expansion in the next year. So, we're going to raise our rates by 50 cents or $1 or whatever. And, oh my God, the level to which people howled about that. You would think, Netflix goes from $6.99 to $7.99 a month. You're still not even paying $10 whole. $10 whole was what you had to pay for the movie channel or HBO or something way back in the day, and you didn't get as much content, and you didn't have control over when and where you wanted to watch it. But the screaming, particularly they're ripping us off. They dropped X, Y, and Z. They had this series and this series, and now they've dropped that, and they're going to charge us more money. Well, yeah, because they were they were being told they had to pay more money for the content. So, a little bit of the stupid grumbling started, and Netflix dealt with it, and they moved on, and people moved on, and the customer base still got bigger, and they just became more successful, and they became more of the model for what people wanted to do. And as that money kept rolling in, even as studios said, no, you got to pay more for less, or you got to pay a small ton of money for the same, the studios looked at the money they were getting by telling Netflix this, and some of the studios, long before they were ever actually able to do it, started looking at Netflix and going, you know what? We don't want a bigger slice of Netflix's pie. We want our own pie. And some of the studios started not renewing some contracts with Netflix. There was a period where you started seeing a lot of things drop off Netflix. And that was, in part, they were either getting it priced way too high, or the owners of the content were just like, no, we have our own plans. We're going to start a companion streaming service to HBO or to whatever else. And some of them said that, and they pulled their stuff off Netflix, and they stumbled several times, and they fumbled several times, and it was years before we actually saw their streaming service. But still, you were seeing the start of getting us to where we are now. And where we are now, Netflix, the only game in town, and the golden age of entertainment. You're paying almost no money at all, and you're getting everything. Just anything and everything was there. And then suddenly you had a couple of other streaming alternatives popped up. Some of them came and went fast. Hulu was the first one to really get a good foothold. Hulu had the nice idea of, we'll make a deal with the networks, to get the new seasons on there, not as full seasons, but as, hey, if you missed it last week, you can catch it for a period of time on Hulu. And while you're watching Hulu for that, check out all of our movies and stuff too, and all the things that we do have seasons and seasons of. So you got that first competitor going, and then slowly some other services rolled out, and some of them just fell on their face, and some of them just limped along until they found themselves a usable way. But as each new service rolled out, and as each new service started trying to find its footing, somebody would say, well, we need to do something to get eyes on us, or eyes off of Netflix and onto us. So periodically somebody would shell out some stupid amount of money, and they would purchase exclusive streaming rights to something. I'm a fan of South Park. I liked South Park, especially the earlier years. The first 10, maybe even the first 18. And if you had Netflix, You could basically watch South Park start to finish anytime you want, except for obviously the Muhammad episode. What was that, season 6, I think, that they pulled off of all the streaming services. You couldn't watch that one, but you could watch every other episode, and from time to time the movie would pop up, but it wasn't a guarantee. And then suddenly that goes away because, somebody else is like, well, South Park's a popular thing. We're going to sign South Park. We'll get the exclusive rights to South Park. Or something else would drop off Netflix and somebody else would sign it as they had the exclusive rights to it. And we've seen that more than a couple of times now with popular British programs like, Doctor Who. Somebody or another locks it up for a year or two as they have the exclusive rights. So you start running into this problem of Netflix, which started out as one-stop shopping for a ridiculously affordable price, and everything you wanted was there. Now you've got 2 or 3 or 4 streaming services, and you're beginning to get the divisions of, but if you want to see this and this, you've got to get this one and this one. But still, it was better. A lot of people started coining that phrase, cutting the cord. We're cutting the cord. Why? Because there's nothing on TV, and look, you can get these streaming services, and this one is $7 or $8. This one's $10. This one is $7.95. So you're spending less than $30 a month, and you can still see more movies than you can see on cable, and you can see all of the TV shows and tons of seasons of them. And if you have Hulu, you can see everything but just a week behind or so, and blah, blah, blah this and blah that. And so they did all this. Well, that was all in good. And it was true, $30. $40, that's still a hell of a lot less than $200. $100 is still a hell of a lot less than $200. But slowly, the streaming services start increasing in number. And on top of that, the streaming services start increasing the idea of having exclusives. And certainly things that are directly related to unexisting property were doing that. The HBO really started getting tight-fisted about their intellectual property and trying to keep most of it exclusive, to their own streaming platforms that they were trying to get off the ground. And obviously, FX, Fox, you'd have FX, and then you'd have the FX streaming app that you also had to have the channel for. So I don't always understand the purpose of that, but you can't. There's a lot of the FX shows now that you can't see on certain other streaming services. You can only see it on something related to their stuff. So now you're starting to get to where, well, it's not 3 of them, it's 4 of them, it's 5 of them, it's 6. If you want to see everything that you want to see, you're buying 7 of them. And yeah, you can sit there and say, well, that's only about $70, and $70 still beats the hell out of $180, $200. Well, yeah, sort of, kind of. But you know what? You're paying $10 a month for that service, and you're only really watching 2 things on that service. And it's starting to suddenly get like cable. Slowly, and not a lot of people noticed it. Fortunately, I can prove I did, because I wrote several things about it for Needless Things in my own blog way back when. But, cutting the cord was just becoming the new cord. It was slowly developing into that. And suddenly, on the heels of, well, we're going to tie things up exclusive as streaming, these existing properties, Netflix jumps out the gate and says, we need a better way to compete. We're not going to rely as much in the future on existing properties. We're going to start doing deals where we create Netflix originals and exclusives. And there's been they've had a mixed track record on that. Some of their exclusives have been amazing. Some of their exclusives have been, what the hell did I just look at? And then some of their exclusives have been just so nobody cared that, honestly, if you go to Netflix and you find on the right, you've got the right interface app, and you click the button, the option buttons, and do all the right stuff, and okay, now we've got a little thing that if I click that, it will show me all of the Netflix exclusives, Netflix originals, pardon me, not exclusives, but originals. And you're sitting there looking at this and you're like, I had no idea Netflix has made that many original shows. And 50% of them look like complete and utter crap, which is probably why I've never heard of them. But Netflix started doing that, and the ones that fell to the wayside and nobody paid any attention to, nobody noticed enough to say, yeah, they're screwing up. The ones that hit big and that made a lot of noise, hit big and made a lot of noise. They're the ones where people were just like, yeah, this is going to be, Netflix is doing, crazy monster profits this year because everybody's going to be jumping on Netflix for this. Well, quietly over in the corner, Amazon, and again, completely off subject, but again, you want to talk about people completely not knowing what they were looking at, and one person being smart enough to know what they had. Most people don't know this about Amazon because they didn't pay attention back in the day, or they're young enough that they're only just now paying attention. But Amazon, when Amazon first started out, a lot of people were laughing at Amazon because Amazon wasn't Amazon as we know it. Amazon was a online bookstore. That's what Amazon was. Amazon was, you can order a book, any book you want from us. And if you ever tried to order from Amazon, it was sometimes a pain in the backside because the early search functionality sucked. You could, if you didn't have all of the right stuff. You know how now you put the name of a movie and you misspell one letter and that movie still comes up. You'd put the name of a book in that you think you'd heard of, and instead of The Monster in the Talladega Swamp, it's The Monster in a Talladega Swamp, and you'd put the in, and it's no book would come up. It was a pain in the neck, but once they got themselves they started out with books, and then they added a little more, and they added a little more, and now there's one guy walking around making more money than most nations. And people treat Amazon as this amazing thing where you can get anything you want, any time of the day you want, and you can get streaming music and movies and TV from. And that streaming movies and TV, kind of like Netflix, became massive, and Amazon took it to another level because not only did Amazon start doing some really well done and greatly praised original programming, but Amazon started working out a deal where it's well, we're not going to be the only streaming service in town, so how do we keep our business and make money off of the other people? So they made their streaming, at least for now, it may change one day, I don't know, but they made streaming part of Amazon Prime. You pay one price per year, you get free shipping on all of your orders, and oh yeah, we'll give you, the movies, the Amazon Prime streaming as well. And if you go to Amazon Prime streaming, you go to this section called channels, and you can find BritBox and Acorn and Shudder and HBO Now. Well, not HBO Now. It's one of the HBOs, but not the one that's just dropped that everybody's all crazy for. But you can find a small ton of streaming services listed as channels. and you can subscribe to a channel, one of those services, through your Amazon Prime service for a small additional price. And sometimes there are limitations, like with Shudder. I get my Shudder through Amazon because it's all in one spot. It's easier that way. And I can watch it anywhere. Full Moon Entertainment launched their app, and I did theirs for a year, and I found it annoying as hell because you'd pay Full Moon for the streaming service, and if you had 2 Rokus in your house on 2 different TVs, you would pay them, but you could only put the service on one Roku. If you registered one Roku, it would unregister your other one. But if you got Full Moon through Amazon, you could have it on every device that you watch your Amazon on. And you could have your Amazon on a couple of Rokus, a couple of cell phones, and a computer. So Amazon kind of thought outside of the box, and they figured out a way to make their competitors work for them. But like I said, there are some drawbacks. I love Joe Bob Briggs. I can't watch Joe Bob Briggs Friday night live. I can only see Joe Bob once it goes into the standardized service, not the live stream service, like the following Sunday or Monday. There are some things that go on to Shudder as Shudder exclusives and originals, like Mayhem did, or Creep Show. And I'm like a week or 2 or sometimes a month behind other people because it won't go to the Amazon Shudder service. But it still goes there. So for a slightly reduced price, and Amazon gets a cut of it. So I'll do that because it's just convenient. And Amazon was smart. They figured that out. But you're still spending more money. And honestly, right now, because of everything that's happened, even before the coronavirus apocalypse and everything else, if I hadn't done an annual subscription to Shudder back in January or February, I'd probably have to drop it right now. I've dropped several of the other services that I had through Amazon just because I need to tighten my budget right now. I probably wouldn't drop Amazon Prime because we use our Prime for free shipping and we use Amazon for various things. So again, Amazon's kind of smart with that. But all of the other streaming services now popping up, they're not quite doing that. And some of them, there's actually, why I kind of corrected myself, there's actually a little bit of a thing going on right now with the new HBO service. You can't get the new HBO service, even a trimmed down version of it, as an Amazon channel. You can get the old Amazon HBO service on the Amazon, but you can't get the new HBO service on Amazon. You also can't get it on through a Roku. Why? I don't know. That was a dumb launch idea, but it's out there. So you would have to find another way for it and do all this other stuff. Right now we've got a new HBO coming out. This big brand new thing with all these extra bells and whistles. Disney Plus. We got Peacock service coming up soon. That's getting a lot of advertising. CBS has its streaming. We've got Shudder, we've got BritBox, we've got Acorn. Acorn, by the way, is like BritBox. It's all the other stuff you remember and associate with British television that apparently is not on BritBox. And make matters worse, pour salt in the wound. You can watch classic Doctor Who on BritBox, but you can't watch any of the new Doctor Who because that's going to be on the new HBO service. There is a Comedy Central streaming service. And it's got tons of classic Comedy Central TV shows on it. You can't watch South Park on it. It's not on it at all. That's going to be on HBO. A lot of this is becoming, when you actually sit down and you put down on paper all of these services, and you start writing down the things that you want to see, and you start realizing that all of these different services DC had an app. I say had because, it's pretty much, I think it's still there, but you might as well just write it off. DC was doing this DC app streaming service, and, they had Doom Patrol and Swamp Thing and a couple of other Teen Titans is like original launch programs, but then you like almost anything else that was related to DC Comics characters. Old cartoons, old shows, everything was all on there. And then Warner Brothers started talking about they were going to launch a new service, and then people started hearing that the new HBO service was actually going to have some of the shows on it that were on the DC streaming, and people are like, well, why am I going to do this, or what are we going to do there? So you write down all of the stuff on paper, and some of it starts getting kind of messy, kind of stupid messy. Well, this is here, and I'm going to pay for this, but wait a minute, this is moving to here. And then you start writing down the exclusives, and then you start writing down, okay, well, what do I really want to see? And when you start writing down what you really want to see and what you'd be willing to pay to see, you start realizing that the streaming services have become the cable tiers. It's not a matter of, well, you're buying 4 or 5 different services and getting only 2 that are good and 3 that are crap as a block. It's not like, getting channels on a cable tier. But it is becoming a little bit like the tier system in that, well, if you really want to see these 2 things that you dearly, dearly love, they're now going to only be available on this service. And this service might not have a whole lot of hell else on it that you're interested in seeing. So you're buying a service for those 2 things and maybe a few odds and end things here and there. And here's this other thing that you really, really love that you were watching on like Hulu and Amazon and Netflix. And wait, now it's exclusive to this service. And this service is $14, $15 a month. And it's like, oops. So, well, okay, I can get that. Well, what else is on there? Well, there's a lot of stuff on there, but some of the low-end stuff that's just kind of, it's okay, it's there, is the generic stuff that overlaps everywhere. So I'm not getting any extra value from that. And then there's a bunch of stuff on there that I just don't care about. So I'd be paying $14 a month for this service, really to only watch 2 or 3 things with any regularity, and then maybe a handful of things on and off. And you start realizing as you're going through that you're doing that with all of these services. And you suddenly realize as you're going through that to watch all the things that you really, really want to watch, that you're really excited about when you see that they're coming out, or shows that you had been watching through other streaming platforms, when the streaming platforms had a little more to offer, you suddenly realize you're looking at having to buy 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 streaming services, and the prices on them all going up to where they're $10 a month, $14 a month, $15 a month. And then if you got a sports fanatic in your house, they want ESPN so they can do all the sports whenever they want. Or you got a fight fanatic in your house and they may want the UFC streaming service. Or you got a pro wrestling fan and they may want the WWE network, which you're not going to get any of that content cross any of it. None of it is going to cross over onto other stuff. You're not going to have all your UFC live events, pay-per-views, and whatnot on any other app. God knows I have no idea what Vince McMahon is doing. I can't say that anymore about the WWE network because depending on the news that comes out, I have no idea what that crazy old man is planning, other than unless he's trying to devalue his own network. But at least for right now, there's a lot of stuff on the WWE network that's just great. It's fantastic if you're a wrestling fan, and you can't get it anywhere else. And there's so much of it, you can't watch it all in a month. So for sports fans or wrestling fans or whoever, then you have to add in these other things. And suddenly you realize you've cut the cord, and if you're not careful, you're paying $120 a month. And the reality of it, when you sit down is and add it up, is you're paying $120 a month for 6 to 10 hours a week of brand new content. And suddenly, when you look at it, you look at how much stuff you are being given versus how little stuff is actually there of quality and worth watching. You suddenly realize you've cut the cord. Welcome to the new cord. Streaming has become cable. It's not any different. It's a different platform. It's a different delivery system. There is a difference in that you have the ability to go in, start something, and whenever you want to, you have that ability, although cable and dish gives you that now with DVRs. And you've actually had that ability even before the era of DVRs if you ran your cable through your VHS player and your VCR. So, and very, very much like people, when people first started out with cable, and they praised the living hell out of it. They praised it as it was the greatest thing in the world. This was the entertainment revolution. Some of those people who were like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world, when they were in their 20s and 30s, in the 80s, these are the same people who, by the time we got around to the 2010s, were like, I can't frickin' stand cable. Cable is a goddamn ripoff. Cable is, nothing is ever on. They're overpriced. You're paying all this extra money so you can watch a handful of things and blah, blah, blah. Well, those same people, or not those same people, but those same types of people, you know, go look on the internet. Go look on forums when people talk about Netflix and how Netflix is jacking up their rates and making us pay more for less, and there really isn't anything on worth watching on Netflix anymore. And oh, look at this, you know, Hulu, or look at this channel, or well, this new one's coming out and they're going to have X, Y, and Z on it, and I really like those, but there's nothing else on that thing I don't care. I'm going to pay $14, $15 a month for this because I really want to see these, but there's nothing else on there. I mean, this is a ripoff. I mean, you're starting to see that, just like you saw it with cable. Just like you saw that with cable as far back as the 90s when that started up. And everybody talks about streaming as though this is this completely new thing. It's totally different. It's not cable. It's so much better than cable. And we're cutting the cord. And yay, the golden age. And it's not. It's not the golden age, because once everybody wants a piece of their pie, and then they want their own pie, and all of this stuff happens, this is what you get. You get cable part 2 in streaming form. You've cut the cord, and you're now attached to the new cord. And yeah, people talk about how they can do things like, well, I can always drop a service here or there, and I can do. Well, guess what? You could do that with cable. You could always drop tiers, and then pick tiers up later. You could always drop a tier here and drop a tier there, or drop down to a different service level, and then decide, well, you know what? I've watched the stuff when it was new on these tiers. I'll drop these tiers, and I'll pick up these tiers, and then I'll catch everything in repeat and watch the stuff that was on those tiers that I wanted to see, you know, and hope that you would actually get them. People were doing stuff like that. Or people were doing the game of, you know what, I think I'm going to drop my cable. Oh, you're going to offer me a big sweet deal to stay in for another year? I'll do that. Or, you know what, your deal isn't nice enough. I'm just going to go ahead and drop you. And, oh, I've got this thing in the mail that says they're going to offer me a sweet deal to jump to you, and I'm going to save a ton of money. So, I mean, we've been doing this even in the age of cable, because this is just the new cord. This is just the new cable. And as much as everybody is crapping on cable right now and still talking, well, there are ways around this, it's still better. And you know what? Here's the thing you're not paying attention to. The people that owned all the cable channels, the people that owned all the cable providers, the people that turned cable from the golden age of entertainment in your home to, oh my God, this is a ripoff and I can't wait to get rid of it. Those are the same people who own and run the streaming services now. Pretty much all of them, except for Amazon and Netflix. Because Amazon is run by Amazon and Netflix is run as it's their own thing. But all of these other streaming services that are out there, you know, Disney owns Disney and all the things that Fox used to own. HBO has a parent company, CBS, NBC, Warner Brothers, all of these people. When you look at all these parent companies and then you see who owns what, some of these people own the cable companies that you hate. Some of these people are the same people that own all the various channels that nothing is ever on except for a few hours a week. The people that ran cable into the ground are the people who are now getting into and owning and running the streaming services. And they are going to do it the exact same way. And they're already doing it. And now you've cut the cord. Welcome to the new cord. And so we don't go very long. I said back at the beginning on part 1 that there were 2 major problems. A few things. If you want to stop here, feel free to stop here. If you think I'm not making any valid points or you're just tired of my voice, which I can understand, I'm tired of my voice and I have to live with it every day. You don't have to move on to part 3. But part 3 in the last part, part 3, which is the last part, I'm going to touch on something that is a major issue that almost nobody is addressing when it comes to cutting the cord and leaving the old media behind and getting into the new media. And it will be substantially shorter than part 1 and part 2. So y'all have a good day. If you don't jump into part 3, y'all have a good day anyhow. If you're going to jump into part 3, I'll be speaking to you in a bit.